So our next speaker is Ari Cornman, Senior Wildlife Biologist for the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians out of Michigan, whom I've known for many years and is an esteemed colleague. Please welcome him.
All right. Well, I'm going to start while that's getting hooked up. First of all, I'd just like to thank the conference organizers. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. There we go. All right. I have to get real close to this. I'd like to thank the conference organizers. This is a fantastic opportunity, and it's long overdue. So thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the Michigan experience that we had, and I'll be talking mostly about the wolf hunt issue that came up, unless you think it's a moot point because they're currently on the endangered species list. Let's remind ourselves that in just about all the Great Lakes, our Congress people are trying to attach delisting rules to just about every piece of legislation they can get their hands on. So it very well could be just a matter of time before this is back in our laps again. So as you can see, the issue, this is just part of the craziness that happened in Michigan, and I'm not even going to attempt to go into detail in all this, but Wisconsin wolf hunting politics was just as crazy as this, if not crazier in some aspects. And we as tribes have a very difficult time influencing this process. Even participating in this process is difficult. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what I think tribes can bring to the debate. And as I see it, there are two main arguments that the tribes have. There are two main platforms that we can insert ourselves into the wolf management debate. The first one is the cultural, religious, and spiritual aspect that tribes bring to the discussion. And this is critical. This is a really important piece. It's a piece that's unique, that pretty much only tribes can bring in their certain specific slant or take on this. Now, I share some of these ideas. I revere wolves, maybe not in the same way, but they certainly occupy a special place, and I think probably many, if not most of you do as well. They're probably the most social animals in existence, maybe besides dolphins and elephants. They occupy particularly important ecological roles in regulation of trophic levels, and we've seen that in Yellowstone when they were returned to Yellowstone, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that. So I don't want to lose this piece, and I don't want anything that I say to be construed that this is not an important part of what tribes can bring to the debate. However, that being said, it hasn't worked, unfortunately. State agencies, the federal government say, thank you very much, we appreciate your views, we're going to do it anyway. They don't really care because they don't have to care. They're not bound to base their policies on other cultures. So I don't mean to say that this isn't important, but one of the things that I think has been lost in this debate, or at least de-emphasized or not emphasized enough is probably the best way to say it, is the role of science. And that's why I think this conference is so important. Tribes have and are building and have great scientific capacity. They have natural resource departments with biologists. They have agreements and capacities to do research, to do science, and to get the science out there as a platform. And so I'm going to talk about what we did in Michigan with respect to bring the tribe that I work for, bringing the science forward and using science to combat wolf management policies, particularly wolf hunting. So what we did, when this was first put on my plate as a biologist, the first thing I did was sit down with Michigan's wolf management plan and see how do they plan to manage wolves. And this is a little bit of the language from the plan. And there are two, this is the part that has to do with hunting. And I'm not going to go into detail or read it, it's just a bunch of text, but there are two parts that I want to highlight. The first one is, this is what DNR, Michigan DNR, Department of Natural Resources, is supposed to do if they're contemplating having a wolf hunt, according to their own plan. The first one is that wolves, they're only supposed to go forward if it can be shown that the density of wolves, in other words, the abundance of wolves, if the number of wolves out there can be shown to be part of the problem, can be created the problem. So there's a demonstrated relationship between the number of wolves that are out there and the problems that mostly cattle farmers are having. The second part is that that there should be no other way, no other non-lethal ways to address the problem before they move to lethal action. And so these are manifested in the plan in a bunch of actions that they're supposed to do. These are analyses that they're supposed to undertake before a hunt goes forward. Well, we went to DNR and said, where are your analyses? We'd like to see them. And they basically didn't have them. It took them a long time to admit it, but we finally did get them to admit that basically there were no scientific analyses, data-based analyses of these actions that were in their own plan. They didn't do what they said that they were going to do. So we thought, well, we'll do it then. If you guys aren't going to do the analyses to justify the hunt and to see whether the hunt was needed and whether it would work, we'll do it, and we'll see what happens. So we went, and this isn't necessarily going to be in chronological order, but it will be in logical order. So we took this first action, which is evaluate the situation to see if a hunt is even needed. Okay, so we teamed up with Dr. Trevis and did the science. We got the data through our consent decree with the state, where they are required to give us information and data on actions that they're doing. So we got the data, which wasn't easy. They didn't want to furnish it, but we finally did get the data. And you can see this graph here. This is number of livestock animals killed, and this is for the Great Lakes states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. You can see right off the bat how low Michigan is. Michigan is in blue on the bottom. You can see how low it is compared to the other states. So comparatively, right off, there's something not quite right with the picture. We did an analysis of the depredation, which is the death of a livestock or attack of a livestock by a wolf. And what we studied was recurrence. So from the time that a cow or a calf is killed, how long does it take to get to the next instance? Because if it's working, you would expect to see longer delays, right? If whatever they're doing to control the wolves is keeping them away, you would hope to see longer delays or a longer recurrence time. So we studied, we categorized the DNR's actions into three bins, if you will. The first was lethal action. So this is trapping wolves and killing them at or near a farm, a rancher's farm. The second one is non-lethal action, where they use hazing kits, flattery, which is fencing with bright colors, or cracker shells. There's a whole bunch of non-lethal actions that they can do that scares the wolf or discourages the wolf from coming back but doesn't kill the wolf. And the third category was inaction, where they usually provided some technical assistance or some advice but didn't actually do anything on the ground. And we studied these at 3 spatial scales. What we found was that the non-lethal actions actually had greater recurrence than the lethal and inaction. And actually, further study is revealing that lethal and inaction are just about equal rather than that greater sign there. There's no statistical difference between the two. So that killing wolves and doing nothing have about the same amount of recurrence. In other words, killing wolves and doing nothing is about the same. Okay? The greatest effect, the greatest lengths of recurrence happen to be the non-lethal. So it's more effective not to kill wolves than to kill wolves. All right? And the more wolves you kill, the more your risk goes up. The more risk of depredations, not necessarily at that site, but at the larger scales, the more the risk of surrounding farms are that you will have a depredation. So what it does is transfer the risk. All right? And we're not sure exactly how that happens yet, but it's very clear that it does happen. Okay? Killing wolves creates worse depredation problems for your neighbors. All right, so the second thing that we did, based on their own action, is to look at whether your proposal, whether your hunt will actually work. Will it actually do anything? Will it accomplish your management objectives? We asked them for their analysis on this. They said, we don't have one, so we decided to do it. And we teamed up with John Vucetich at Michigan Technological University to do this analysis, along with other colleagues. And I'm going to skip over the details of the wolf hunt, other than to say the numbers here, the red numbers, are the quotas in each of the wolf management units. So this is how many wolves were allowed to be killed across the wolf range in Michigan. So we did a report, and we teamed up with, you may recognize some of the names, if maybe you can't see them, but you may recognize some of the prominent wolf biologists that teamed up on this study with us. And we submitted a report to DNR, and the gist of it was that not only would your wolf harvest not appreciably reduce wolf abundance, which is the whole point of a hunt, right, is to reduce the number of wolves out there and somehow have an effect. Not only would your plan not do that if you look at the data and you look at the statistics, but and I'm going to skip over this for lack of time, but if you're curious, you can ask later. But even if you were to have a reduction, it wouldn't have any appreciable reduction on the number of depredations out there, just based on the fact that there's so much that goes into what affects a depredation, that the number of wolves out there, the spread of this curve, if any of you understand what R-squared values are, the spread of this curve shows that even if you had 100 wolf, and they weren't even talking about killing anywhere close to 100, but even if you did go up to 100, there'd be no statistical difference between the number of depredations you would expect between the number of wolves out there and the number of wolves minus 100. So what they were doing, and I'm going to skip over this has to do with wolf behavior. Real quick, the timing of depredations was way off. Most of the depredations happened in spring and summer, but the hunt was during the winter. So how are wolves supposed to connect a hunt with depredations when you're hunting them when the depredations don't even happen? It doesn't make any scientific sense, behavioral sense, if you understand about wolf biology. So armed with these two facts, first of all, that that their hunt wasn't needed, and that the actions that they were taking were more effective than the actions that they were proposing. And second of all, the proposal that they had to hunt wolves wasn't going to work and was not going to meet their management objectives. We went and testified. When I say we, the tribal representatives as well as academic colleagues that we worked with went and testified in front of the Michigan Natural Resources Commission and basically held their feet to the fire. I like to think of it as we spoke truth to power about the rationale for their wolf hunt and said it doesn't meet scientific scrutiny. Not only that, but we furnished you all this evidence, scientific evidence, that what you're doing doesn't make any sense, and we have received no response from DNR. They have not responded and have actually gone on record saying they will not respond to our scientific evidence. And I just want to quickly wrap up, but I want to make the point that I think this is useful. We don't know what the fallout of this is going to be or how it will manifest, but I think there are some really valuable lessons for here in Wisconsin. And with regard to the Wisconsin hunting that's happened, I think there are three key points where you can get them on the science, where there's just not sound science. The first is the target population. I think it's 350, and there's no scientific basis for that at all. It's just a number that's plucked out of the air, okay? And I think that's an important point, that tribes can really hammer that point to the powers that be. The second are hunt quotas. These are politically based and have no science behind them whatsoever. And I think showing that and demonstrating that and getting that out to the public would be really critical. The third part are the human dimensions. We're going to hear some about this later, but there are lots of studies, all kinds of statements that these state governments make, like, well, we're going to hunt wolves so that hunters are more tolerant of wolves and things like that. They make all kinds of statements and arguments like that. And I'll tell you, the human dimensions research that is out there either contradicts it or just doesn't exist to support statements like that. And so I'm going to wrap up because I'm over time, I think. But thank you all, and if you want to ask questions, we'll be available later in the panel. So thank you.